The first egg hit my windshield with a wet thud, then another, and another. Yellow slime oozed down the glass as the crowd gathered. Factory workers in their blue uniforms, faces twisted with rage, hurling eggs and screaming. Through my side mirror, I counted them swarming around my car, 43 in total. Corporate scum, go back to headquarters. My knuckles whitened against the steering wheel. The rotten smell seeped through the air vents as more eggs smashed against my windows, some finding their way through the half-open sunroof. The yolk dripped onto my new blazer, onto the leather seats, onto the papers in my lap. "Mina, we need to call someone," whispered Ella from the passenger seat, ducking as an egg hit her window with particular force. Her fingers hovered over her phone, shaking. "This is assault. They can't do this." I watched as Fenton, the factory union representative, directed the chaos from the sidelines. His smirk was unmistakable as he pointed toward my car, guiding workers to surround us completely. He'd orchestrated this whole thing, this public humiliation, and it was working. "No need to call anyone," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "We're leaving." But now, I slowly maneuvered the car forward, inching through the crowd that reluctantly parted, continuing their egg assault until we reached the main road. The factory, a hulking gray structure against the cloudy sky, grew smaller in my rearview mirror. "Where are we going?" Ella asked, wiping egg from her sleeve. "Back to the hotel?" "No," I said, making a sharp left turn opposite from our accommodations. "We're going to the legal office." "Legal? But they'll just say there's not enough evidence to." "There's always evidence, Ella. Always. People like Fenton think they're untouchable because they've never met someone willing to look hard enough." My hands were sticky on the wheel, egg drying between my fingers, and he's about to learn I'm that someone. The drive to the legal office took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of silence, of eggs solidifying on my skin, of planning each careful step ahead. By the time we parked, I had the beginnings of a strategy forming, one that would require patience, precision, and a complete lack of mercy. Ella glanced at me as I checked my appearance in the mirror. "Are you really going in looking like that, with egg in your hair?" "Absolutely," I replied. "I want them to see exactly what happened. Sometimes, you have to embrace the mess to clean it up permanently." As we walked into the modest building housing our legal team, I felt a strange calm overtake me. Fenton had made his move. Now, it was my turn. Before we continue any further with this story, thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you're enjoying it so far, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to hear more true stories like this one. Your support makes these narratives possible, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's get back to what happened next. My name is Tessa Quinn, and up until that day, I'd spent 8 years building a reputation for fixing broken systems. Not the mechanical kind, the human kind. Companies would send me to their troubled locations to solve problems no one else could figure out. I wasn't well liked. I wasn't supposed to be. I was effective. The Westridge factory assignment seemed straightforward when it landed on my desk 3 weeks earlier. Worker productivity had plummeted, safety incidents had doubled, and quality control was non-existent. My job was to identify the issues and implement solutions, no matter who objected. What I didn't know then was that I was walking into a fortress built on secrets, with Fenton as its self-appointed king. "Tell me about the union representative," I had asked Ella during our prep work. She'd been my assistant for 2 years, researching each assignment before we arrived. "Fenton Gray, been the rep for 15 years. Workers trust him completely. Management tolerates him because he keeps things manageable." Manageable. Meaning he makes problems disappear. Ella handed me a file. "He's got connections everywhere in this town. His sister works in the mayor's office. His cousin is chief of police. He's untouchable, according to our contacts." I remembered smiling at that. Nobody's untouchable, Ella. They just haven't been touched by the right person yet. My first week at Westridge was spent observing. I noticed everything. The nervous glances when certain machines started making unusual sounds, the workers who kept small bottles of pain relievers in their pockets, the mysterious locked room on the east side of the building that wasn't on any floor plan. When I finally tried speaking with workers individually, they clammed up. Someone was always watching, usually one of Fenton's loyalists. And whenever I scheduled a meeting with the full staff, last-minute emergencies would cause cancellations. It was during my second week that I found Yvonne. She worked on line 7, operating a machine that sealed packages, Her hands were covered in small burns that she tried to hide with fingerless gloves. "The chemicals eat through standard gloves," she whispered when I cornered her in the break room. "We've asked for better protection, but Fenton says it costs too much, and management won't budge. Has anyone reported this to safety regulators?" Her laugh was bitter. 3 people tried last year. All 3 were fired for unrelated performance issues within a month. Fenton promised he'd handle it, but nothing changed, except those who complained lost their jobs. That night, I snuck back into the factory with Ella. We broke no rules. My clearance allowed 24/7 access, but we didn't announce our presence either. What we found in that locked room changed everything. Barrels of industrial chemicals with hazard labels deliberately painted over. Safety equipment made from materials that would melt on contact with said chemicals, and a separate water system for specific offices, including Fenton's. "We need to report this immediately," Ella said, taking photos with her phone. "Not yet. We need more information. People are getting sick, Tessa. And I want to make sure whoever's responsible doesn't escape consequences through technicalities. We need to understand why Fenton is protecting management on this." It took 4 days of digging, calling in favors from contacts across the industry, and careful observation. The answer wasn't what either of us expected. Fenton wasn't protecting management from the workers. He was working with management to exploit them both. The chemicals being used were banned in most countries, but significantly cheaper. The supplies came through a distribution company owned by Fenton's brother-in-law. The kickbacks went to an account under his mother's maiden name. "He's killing his own people for money," Ella whispered, when we connected the final dots. "These are the same people who elected him to protect them." When I submitted my preliminary report to regional headquarters, recommending immediate shutdown for safety violations, I knew there would be resistance. What I didn't expect was for someone to leak a modified version of my report to the factory workers, one that suggested I was recommending permanent closure and relocation of operations overseas. Fenton had made his move, and that's how I found myself, 3 weeks into my assignment, covered in eggs and walking into our legal department with revolution in my heart. "Miss Quinn," greeted Harriet, the head of legal, her eyes widening at my appearance. "What happened to you?" "Fenton happened, and I need your help to end him." For the next 2 hours, I laid out everything we'd discovered: the illegal chemicals, the kickbacks, the modified water supply that kept management and Fenton safe, while workers were slowly being poisoned, the altered reports. "Even with all this," Harriet cautioned, "it'll be difficult to make anything stick. Fenton has the workers convinced you're the enemy, and his connections in local government will make prosecution challenging." "I don't need to prosecute him," I replied. "I just need the workers to see the truth. Can you get me access to the water testing equipment used by state regulators?" "Not local, state, possibly." "Why?" "Because tomorrow, Fenton is hosting an all-hands meeting to formally demand my removal. He thinks it's his victory lap. I want to make it his funeral." That night, as I scrubbed dried egg from my hair in the hotel shower, my phone pinged repeatedly. Anonymous texts flooded in. "Leave town tonight if you know what's good for you. Nobody crosses Fenton and keeps their job. We know where you sleep." I forwarded each message to Harriet, then turned off my phone. Sleep wouldn't come easily, but I needed to be sharp tomorrow. The confrontation ahead would require perfect timing and unshakable nerve. Morning arrived with news that Fenton had called for a factory-wide vote on my removal. According to Ella's sources, 95% of workers had already declared their support for him. The remaining 5% were too afraid to vote otherwise. "He's planning something big for the assembly today," Ella warned as we drove toward the factory. "Word is, he's going to humiliate you in front of everyone, make an example out of you." I nodded, watching the road ahead. "Perfect." "Perfect? Tessa, he's got everyone against you. This could get dangerous." "Sometimes, Ella, you need to give your enemies exactly what they want, right before you take everything they have." As we pulled into the parking lot, I noticed the state regulatory van already in position, exactly as planned. Harriet had come through. Now we just needed Fenton to play his part. The factory's main assembly hall was packed. Workers stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces a mix of anger and anticipation as Ella and I walked in. A makeshift stage had been erected at the far end, where Fenton stood like a conqueror, microphone in hand. His smile widened when he spotted me. "And here she is, folks, the woman who wants to shut us down and ship our jobs overseas." His voice boomed through the speakers. Boos erupted from the crowd, Someone threw an empty water bottle that sailed past my head. I kept walking forward, my eyes never leaving Fenton's. "Let her through," Fenton commanded, gesturing magnanimously. "Let her face you all before she goes." The crowd parted reluctantly, creating a narrow path. I counted the faces as I walked, familiar now after 3 weeks. Yvonne with her burned hands, Marcus from shipping with the persistent cough, Zoe, who'd been taking increasing sick days but couldn't afford to quit. "Miss Quinn has something to say to you all," Fenton announced as I reached the stage. "Perhaps an apology for betraying your trust? Or maybe she's finally admitting that her so-called safety concerns were just excuses to close our factory." I took the microphone, acutely aware of the hostile energy surrounding me. For a moment, I wondered if I'd miscalculated, if Harriet's team hadn't managed to get everything in place. The doubt must have shown on my face because Fenton's smile grew wider. "Nothing to say?" he taunted. "Actually," I replied, my voice echoing through the hall, "I do have something to say. But first, I have a question for all of you." I turned to face the workers. "How many of you have experienced unexplained health issues in the past year? Skin irritation, breathing problems, persistent headaches?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Hesitantly, hands began to rise. 5 at first, then 12, then 30. "Put your hands down," Fenton snapped. "This is exactly the kind of scare tactics I warned you about." "I'm not here to scare anyone," I continued, keeping my voice steady. "I'm here because I found something alarming in this factory, something that's been deliberately hidden from you." "More lies." Fenton grabbed for the microphone, but I held firm. "The chemicals you're working with aren't what you've been told. The safety equipment you've been given isn't adequate, and the water—" "Enough!" Fenton successfully wrestled the microphone away. "This is exactly what management wants. Division among us. Quinn is trying to distract us from her real agenda." The crowd roared in agreement. Fenton had them in his palm again, their moment of doubt extinguished. "Tell them about your separate water supply, Fenton," I said, loudly enough for those nearby to hear. His eyes flashed with momentary panic before he recovered. Another desperate lie from a desperate woman. "Is it?" I nodded toward the doors, where Harriet was entering with 2 people in official state inspector uniforms. The state regulatory board might disagree. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Fenton's face. He hadn't expected outside officials, ones beyond his local influence. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice cracking slightly. "Just a routine inspection," I replied. "Nothing to worry about if everything's above board, right?" The inspectors moved through the crowd, which parted for them more readily than it had for me. They carried testing equipment and headed straight for the water fountains. "This is a publicity stunt," Fenton announced, regaining his composure. "These people aren't even real inspectors." Inspector Mallory Camden and Deputy Inspector Tran. One of them called out, holding up credentials. "State Environmental Protection Division." Fenton's face paled visibly. The name Camden clearly meant something to him. Something troubling. "Mallory Camden? Any relation to Judge Camden?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "My mother," she replied coolly, "whom you've never met, despite your claims of influence with the state judiciary." The first crack in Fenton's armor appeared. I watched as he attempted to regain control of the situation. "This inspection wasn't scheduled," he protested. "We have protocols. Surprise inspections are standard procedure when we receive reports of potential environmental hazards," Inspector Camden explained, already collecting water samples. The crowd watched in tense silence as the inspectors worked. Some of the workers exchanged confused glances. Others looked increasingly worried. Fenton kept talking, trying to dismiss the importance of what was happening, but his voice had lost its authoritative edge. "While they work," I said loudly, addressing the crowd, "I want to show you something." I gestured to Ella, who had set up a projection screen at the side of the room. She nodded and pressed a button on her tablet. The screen illuminated with a floor plan of the factory, one that wasn't in the official documentation. "This is the actual water supply system for this building," I explained. "Notice anything unusual?" The workers moved closer, examining the diagram. It took only moments before someone noticed. "There are 2 separate systems," called out Marcus from the back. "Why are there 2? "Excellent question," I replied. "One system serves the main factory floor, break rooms, and general bathrooms. The other serves only the management offices and, notably, the union representatives' private facilities. All eyes turned to Fenton, who was now visibly sweating. "This is standard design," he stammered. For pressure regulation. Is it?" I asked. "Then you won't mind drinking from the general water supply right now in front of everyone?" The challenge hung in the air. Workers who had been hostile to me minutes before were now watching their representative with growing suspicion. "This is ridiculous," Fenton scoffed. "I don't have to prove anything." "Actually, sir, you might want to see this," called Inspector Camden, who had finished her preliminary tests. She held up a digital reader with flashing red numbers. "The water from the main supply is showing dangerous levels of industrial solvents and heavy metals. The separate supply for the offices is testing clean." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. A low, angry murmur spread through the crowd. "Is that why you never drink from our fountains, Fenton?" called Yvonne. "Is that why you always bring your own water bottle? Or why management never gets sick like we do?" added another worker. Fenton's face hardened. He looked around desperately, sensing control slipping away. "This is a setup. Quinn has tampered with the water to frame me." "That would be quite impressive," remarked Inspector Camden, "considering we brought sealed testing equipment that hadn't been handled by anyone from this company." The crowd's anger was palpable now, but it had found a new target. Workers began pressing closer to Fenton, their expressions shifting from confusion to rage. "You told us she was trying to shut us down," someone shouted, "but she was trying to help us." Fenton's gaze darted around frantically, then fixed on me with pure hatred. "You think you've won? You have no idea who you're dealing with." He pulled out his phone and made a quick call, speaking too quietly for anyone to hear. When he turned back to the crowd, his confidence had returned. "Folks, calm down. There's clearly been some kind of mistake with this testing equipment. Let's take a break and reconvene in an hour." When the doors burst open, a man in an expensive suit strode in, flanked by 2 security guards. I recognized him immediately. William Crest, the regional director. Fenton's face lit up with relief. "William, perfect timing. We're dealing with some baseless accusations." "Save it, Fenton," Crest interrupted coldly. "I just got off the phone with our legal team. They've informed me of Miss Quinn's findings. All of them." Fenton blanched. "Whatever she told you." "Not just what she told me," Crest cut in. "What she proved. The illegal chemical substitutions, the kickbacks, the separate water systems, all of it." The factory fell completely silent. Fenton stood frozen, his mind visibly racing for an escape route. "You misunderstand," he finally said, forcing a laugh. "I was investigating these issues myself, gathering evidence discreetly to protect the workers." "Were you?" Crest asked. "Then perhaps you can explain why your signature is on every purchase order for these illegal chemicals? Or why payments from the chemical supplier were deposited into an account under your mother's maiden name within 48 hours of each order?" The blood drained from Fenton's face. "Those records were supposed to be destroyed," he whispered, then immediately realized his mistake. Those 5 words confirmed everything. The workers erupted in outrage. Surging toward the stage, security stepped between them and Fenton, not to protect him, but to ensure the crowd didn't take justice into their own hands. "You poisoned us," shouted Yvonne, holding up her scarred hands. "For money." "My wife's miscarriages? Were they because of the water?" demanded Marcus, his voice breaking. Fenton backed away, looking for escape. Finding none, he pointed at me. "She's staging a corporate takeover. This is all part of her plan to get rid of our union protection." "Actually," I said, stepping forward, "I recommended keeping this factory open, with full staffing, but with proper safety measures and medical treatment for affected workers." I nodded to Ella, who projected a new document on the screen, my actual report, with my signature and timestamp. "This stands in stark contrast to what Fenton showed you," I continued. "His version was edited to remove my safety recommendations and add false statements about closing the factory." The crowd's fury reached new heights. Workers who had been hurling eggs at my car days before were now looking at me with something approaching respect, and looking at Fenton with murderous rage. "Security," Crest ordered. "Escort Mr. Gray from the premises. His access is permanently revoked." As Fenton was led away, he locked eyes with me one last time. "This isn't over," he mouthed. I held his gaze steadily. "For you, it is." But even as the doors closed behind him, I knew better. People like Fenton didn't go down without a fight. His connections might be exaggerated, but they weren't non-existent. And now, with his livelihood and reputation crumbling, He had nothing left to lose. The real battle was just beginning. After Fenton's departure, the factory erupted into chaos. Workers gathered in small clusters, processing the betrayal. Some wept openly, others argued about warning signs they'd ignored for years. I watched it all unfold, giving them space to absorb the truth, while Crest began organizing immediate water delivery and medical evaluations. "You did it," Ella whispered beside me. "You actually took down Fenton." "Not yet," I cautioned. "We've exposed him, but someone with that much to lose is dangerous. This is just the beginning." Her phone buzzed with a message. "The legal team wants us back at the office immediately." Something about preemptive measures. The drive to the legal office was tense. News travels fast in small towns, and already people were watching from storefronts as we passed. Some waved, others glared. Fenton had deep roots here, and not everyone would welcome his fall from grace. Harriet was waiting when we arrived, her expression grim. "We have a problem. Judge Wilcox just signed emergency injunctions against our testing methods, claiming improper procedure. He's also issued a gag order preventing anyone from discussing water quality issues at the factory. Let me guess, he plays poker with Fenton? Golf, actually. Every Sunday for 15 years. I sank into a chair. So the test results can't be used? Not officially. Not yet. And there's more. 3 workers who spoke out against Fenton today have already received eviction notices. Their landlord is Fenton's cousin. The retaliation had begun faster than even I anticipated. Fenton was leveraging every connection to regain control and punish those who turned against him. "What about Inspector Camden?" I asked. "Her results would stand up in higher courts. She's been temporarily reassigned pending an internal review. Someone filed complaints about her targeting specific businesses inappropriately." I leaned forward. "So Fenton is using the system against us. Fine. Let's change the battlefield." That evening, the local news reported that unsubstantiated claims had disrupted operations at the factory, with outside agitators causing unnecessary panic. The reporter, whose brother-in-law worked at Fenton's brother's construction company, emphasized that proper channels should be followed for workplace concerns. By morning, my hotel had mysteriously lost my reservation. My rental car had 2 flat tires. The local coffee shop refused to serve Ella when she went for our usual breakfast. The message was clear. This town belonged to Fenton. "We should request a transfer," Ella suggested as we sat in our replacement car outside the factory. Workers were trickling in, many looking nervously in our direction. "Corporate would understand." "That's exactly what Fenton wants," I replied, watching as a familiar figure approached. Yvonne, the worker with the burned hands. She tapped on my window, glancing anxiously over her shoulder. "Can we talk somewhere else?" "Not here." 20 minutes later, we sat in a diner, 2 towns over. Yvonne nervously twisted a napkin in her scarred fingers. "Everyone's terrified," she explained. "Fenton spent all night making calls. People who spoke against him yesterday found their family members losing jobs, their kids getting kicked off sports teams, their loan applications suddenly denied." "Has he threatened you?" I asked. "Not directly, but this morning, I found pictures of my daughter's school on my porch. Just pictures, nothing written on them." Her voice cracked. "She's 7. My blood ran cold. "Has anyone stood up to him?" Marcus tried. "Now his brother's garage is being audited by the city, and his mother's nursing home care is under review." She leaned closer. "But that's not why I wanted to talk to you. There's something you need to know about Fenton's office." She slid a key across the table. "Cleaning staff backup. His private bathroom has a locked cabinet behind the mirror. I've never seen inside, but every month a package arrives that goes straight there. He always handles it himself." I pocketed the key. "Why are you helping me? You're taking an enormous risk." Yvonne rolled up her sleeve, revealing a pattern of burns extending past her wrist. "My daughter has the same marks now, from hugging me after my shifts." Her eyes hardened. "Some risks are necessary." When I returned to the factory that afternoon, the atmosphere had shifted again. Workers avoided eye contact. Security guards followed my movements. Crest had been called away for an emergency meeting at headquarters. Fenton's been reinstated temporarily pending investigation, a supervisor informed me smugly. He'll be back tomorrow to continue union negotiations. On whose authority? I demanded. Regional Vice President Collins. Seems your allegations aren't quite as solid as you thought. Vice President Collins, whose son had received a mysterious scholarship 3 years ago when Fenton became union representative. The web of obligations and favors stretched further than I'd imagined. That night, I avoided my hotel, choosing instead to work from an all-night diner outside town. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Your career ends tomorrow. Consider which bridges you want to burn on your way out. Attached was a drafted press release announcing my termination for falsifying safety reports and attempting to provoke labor unrest. It was dated for tomorrow afternoon. Ella called moments later, her voice shaking. Someone broke into my room. They went through everything, my laptop, my notes, and they left a dead rat on my pillow. Where are you now? Hospital parking lot. I didn't know where else to go. Stay there, I'm coming to get you. By midnight, we had relocated to a motel 30 miles away, paying cash. I spread our remaining evidence across the bed, looking for angles we'd missed. Fenton had countered quickly and effectively, neutralizing our advantage and positioning himself as the victim. What's our next move? Ella asked, applying ice to a bruise on her arm from rushing out of her room. We need to see what's in that bathroom cabinet. Tonight, breaking into the factory after hours wasn't technically illegal with my access credentials, but it felt dangerous nonetheless. The night security guard, not one of Fenton's people, waved us through after checking my ID. What are you doing here so late, Miss Quinn? Finishing safety assessments before tomorrow's meeting, I replied smoothly. Won't take long. Fenton's office was dark and still. Using our phone flashlights, we made our way to his private bathroom. The key Yvonne provided worked perfectly on the mirrored cabinet. Inside, we found financial records, dozens of them. Payments to local officials, blackmail material on management, medical reports showing chemical exposure that had been hidden from workers, and most damning of all, a signed agreement with the chemical supplier, acknowledging the dangers while agreeing to maintain dual water systems to protect essential personnel. This is everything we need, Ella whispered, photographing each document. Why would he keep this here? Why would he keep this here? Arrogance, I replied. People like Fenton believe they're untouchable. They keep trophies of their victories. As we finished, my phone buzzed with an alert. The motion sensors at the factory entrance had been triggered. Someone else had arrived. We need to go, I urged, closing the cabinet and pocketing the evidence. Now, we slipped out the back entrance, just as lights came on in the main hallway. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Fenton himself, accompanied by two men I didn't recognize. They headed straight for his office. The next morning, the factory was abuzz with news. Fenton would address the entire workforce at noon. Sources claimed he would announce definitive proof that I had manipulated the water tests and fabricated safety concerns as part of a corporate takeover strategy. He knows we found something, Ella worried as we watched workers file into the assembly hall. This is a trap. Yes, I agreed calmly. It is. Fenton took the stage at exactly noon, looking triumphant. The regional vice president stood beside him, along with the local police chief. The message was clear. Authority had chosen its side. Yesterday, we experienced an unfortunate disruption based on falsified information, Fenton began, his voice booming with renewed confidence. Today, I'm pleased to announce we've identified the source of these fabrications. On cue, the police chief stepped forward. Miss Quinn, we have evidence that you tampered with water samples and planted false documentation. I'm going to have to ask you to come with us. The crowd murmured. Workers who had believed me just yesterday now looked uncertain. This was Fenton's moment, his restoration as their trusted leader. He smiled broadly, victory within his grasp. Actually, I said clearly, standing my ground, I think you'll want to delay that arrest. And why would we do that? The police chief asked condescendingly. Because at this exact moment, the state attorney general is receiving evidence of systemic corruption involving water contamination, illegal chemicals, bribes to local officials, and blackmail. I checked my watch. The evidence includes financial records, medical reports, and signed agreements acknowledging willful endangerment of workers, all discovered in Mr. Gray's private bathroom cabinet. Fenton's face went ashen. You're bluffing. Those documents are... He stopped abruptly, realizing his mistake. Are what, Mr. Gray? I pressed. Forged? Then you shouldn't worry about the originals I sent to the Attorney General, or to the FDA, or to OSHA, or to the national media. The vice president stepped away from Fenton, instantly creating distance. You broke into my office, Fenton sputtered. That evidence is inadmissible. I entered the factory using my authorized access credentials. I corrected, and opened a company cabinet using a company key provided by authorized cleaning staff. Nothing illegal about that. Fenton lunged toward me, rage overtaking his judgment. 2 workers intervened, holding him back. It's over, Fenton, I said quietly. The Attorney General doesn't answer to your poker buddies. Neither does the national media. You can't threaten or bribe your way out of this one. On cue, my phone rang. I answered on speaker. Yes? Miss Quinn, this is Deputy Attorney General Walters. We've reviewed the evidence you provided. Arrest warrants are being issued for Fenton Gray and 7 other individuals. State police will arrive within the hour. Please ensure all parties remain on premises. The assembly hall erupted into chaos. The police chief backed away from Fenton. The vice president was already on his phone, undoubtedly calling his lawyer. And Fenton himself stood paralyzed, watching as his empire collapsed. You ruined me, he hissed when I approached him. You have no idea what you've done. Actually, I do, I replied softly. You see, Fenton, I've dealt with men like you my entire career. Men who build little kingdoms on other people's suffering, who believe their connections make them invincible. I leaned closer. Would you like to know the difference between us? You saw these workers as tools. I saw them as witnesses. I pulled out my phone, showing him the screen. On it was a live map tracking 43 different mobile signals, one from each worker who had surrounded my car that day, pelting it with eggs. From the moment they attacked my car, I knew they weren't the enemy. They were victims, acting on false information. So I tracked their movements throughout the factory, mapped which areas correlated with their symptoms, documented every cough, rash, and complaint. His eyes widened as understanding dawned. You used them as guinea pigs. I used them as evidence collectors. Every worker who threatened me has since received a full medical examination, authorized by me, paid for by the company. Their blood work, tissue samples, and medical histories create an undeniable pattern of chemical exposure that matches exactly with your supply chain decisions. 4 state police officers entered the hall, moving purposefully toward Fenton. One last thing, I said as they approached. Remember that eggshell fragment I kept from my car? I had it analyzed. The proteins were deformed, consistent with chickens exposed to the same chemicals you've been using here. Even your props were evidence against you. As the officers led Fenton away in handcuffs, Yvonne approached me, tears streaming down her face. Is it really over? This part is, I confirmed. The healing part is just beginning. 6 weeks later, the factory reopened with new safety protocols, proper equipment, and completely replaced water systems. Every worker received medical treatment, compensation, and ironclad guarantees of job security. And Fenton? He faced 43 separate civil lawsuits in addition to criminal charges for fraud, reckless endangerment, and environmental crimes. His connections abandoned him one by one, each saving themselves. His assets were frozen, his reputation destroyed, and his power completely evaporated. The final blow came when the judge, not one of his golfing buddies, ordered that remediation costs for the factory water supply be paid from Fenton's personal accounts. Every paycheck he might earn for the next 30 years would go first to the workers he had poisoned. I kept my promise to the workers. The factory remained open. No jobs were lost except those of the corrupt. And one small memento remained in my possession, a single dried eggshell, now framed on my office wall. A reminder that sometimes victory requires allowing yourself to appear defeated, right until the moment you aren't. Thank you so much for staying with this story until the end. If you found Tessa's journey against corporate corruption compelling, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of justice served. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed someone like Fenton getting their comeuppance? What would you have done in Tessa's position? Your engagement helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most powerful weapon against corruption isn't force, it's patience.